Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 140. Shizun turn over. Chu Wanning did indeed dream that night. Unfortunately, contrary to Mo Ran's auspicious wishes, it wasn't a very good dream. In the dream, Chu Wanning returned to that time in Kaidi town when he had mended the barrier during the Heavenly Rift incident. However, this time, the one who was helping him mend the barrier between the mortal realm and the ghost realm was Shimei. It was snowing heavily under the dark heavily leaden sky. Shimei couldn't withstand it and was targeted by the malevolent spirits who had pierced his chest. He fell from the coiling dragon pillar formation and fell on the sow-filled ground. Mo Ran ran over and picked up the bleeding body of Shimei. He knelt down in front of him and begged him to help and cure Shimei. To save his disciple. He very much wanted to help him as well, but since the effect of dragon pillar formation was reciprocal, he was as heavily wounded as Shimei. He was pale and did not say a word. He was afraid that if he opened his mouth, he would choke on blood and the surrounding ghosts would swarm over and tear them all to pieces. Shizun. I beg you. I beg you. Mo Ran was crying and kowtowing to him. Chu Wanning closed his eyes for a moment before he decided to take the best course of action at that time. He left them. Shimei died. Mo Ran never forgave him for it. He dreamt of the Nahi Bridge at Shisheng Peak. It was during the cold spring when the rain fell and the tender sprouts of the spring trees were moistened by the rain. The blue stone path beneath his feet seemed endless. He walked alone with an umbrella. Suddenly, he saw another person walking over from the other side of the bridge. He was dressed in black and did not hold an umbrella. He held a stack of books wrapped in oil paper and walked in his direction. Chu Wanning could not help but slow down. The person clearly saw him as well, but that person's footsteps did not slow down. He only raised his eyelashes, which were wet from the rain, and glanced at him coldly. Chu Wanning wanted to call out to him. He wanted to say, Mo. But Mo Ran did not give him any chance to speak. He held his books and walked to the far left of the Nahi Bridge. One more inch and he would have fallen into the river. It was obvious that he just wanted to be a little further away from his Shizun who was walking on the right side. They walked up to the middle of the bridge. A person who was used to holding an umbrella was being rained on while the person who normally didn't use an umbrella passed each other as they both walked under the rain. The person without the umbrella continued to walk on while the person with the umbrella became rooted in place. As the raindrops pattered on the umbrella, Chu Wanning stood in the same place for a long time. He stayed for so long that his legs became numb. It was as if the cold air had seeped into his bones. He suddenly felt very tired and could not walk anymore. The dreamscape darkened. It was heavy and cold. It was as cold as the rain and as heavy as the pair of legs that could no longer move. In his sleep, Chu Wanning turned to his side and curled his body as small as he could. Something trickled down the corner of his eyes and moistened the pillow. He vaguely knew that this was just a dream, but why did it feel so real? He could practically felt Mo Ran's hatred, his disappointment, and his derisiveness. However, is that it? Did it end here? He was not reconciled. It was as if his unwillingness made the light around him brighten up again. He was still in that dream. It had been many months since Shimei had passed away. Mo Ran's temperament grew gloomier and gloomier by the day. He spoke less and less. However, he still showed up to all the cultivation classes. However, he would just listen and did not talk much with Chu Wanning. Chu Wanning didn't explain why he couldn't save Shi Mingjing back then. He had seen Mo Ran's attitude and knew that it was useless to say anything now that things had come to this. In the cultivation class that day, Mo Ran stood at the top of a pine tree as instructed. He was training about the convergence of spiritual power. However, for some reason, he suddenly lost his stamina and fell straight down. Chu Wanning did not have time to think. He quickly rushed over to help him. But in his haste, he did not have the chance to cast any spells. The two of them fell heavily from the tree and landed on the ground. Fortunately, the soil was very soft and there was a thick layer of pine needles covering the ground. They were generally unscathed. However, Chu Wanning's wrist sustained a cut by a protruding sharp branch. It was a hideous wound and blood flowed out of it. Mo Ran looked at his wound. Then, for the first time in months, he raised his eyes and looked directly at Chu Wanning's face. Finally, he said, "Shizun, you're bleeding." His tone was flat but the words he uttered were warm. "I have some ointment and bandages in my kinkan bag. Let's take care of that." They sat in the dense coniferous forest. The air was filled with the fragrance of pine and cypress. Chu Wanning did not say anything. He looked at Mo Ran whose head was lowered. He silently wrapped the bandages around his wound, one round after another. The youth's eyelashes were trembling. Chu Wanning could not see the expression on his face. For a moment, he suddenly felt an urge to gather enough courage to ask, "Mo Ran, did you really hate me that much?" However, at that time, the wind was blowing a gentle breeze while the sun shone warmly. Around them, birds were chirping while insects were buzzing amongst the leaves. His injured hand was quietly held by Mo Ran as he was bandaging his wound. Everything was peaceful and tranquil. In the end, he did not ask as he did not want to disturb this serene picture. He suddenly felt that the answer was really not that important anymore. What was important was that in this dream, after Shimei died, his blood, his injury could more or less be exchanged for Mo Ran's attention, could ease the tension between them a little bit. The next day, when Chu Wanning woke up and stayed dazed for a moment. As he lay on the bed, he could feel a faint pain in his arm and what seemed to be some residual warmth. After a long while, he rubbed his face tiredly. He couldn't help but feel that it was funny. What kind of nonsense was he dreaming about? People say one most likely dream about what they had been thinking about during the day. Could it be that after seeing Shimei's handsome appearance, he felt a little depressed and decided to vent it in his dream? But then, how could he dream of Shi Mingjing dying? It was really ridiculous. He got up and dressed. After washing up and rinsing his mouth, he tied up his hair. Soon, he forgot about the fragmented dream from last night. Today, the village chief and the others were going to make rice cakes. In the lower cultivation world, rice cakes were a must delicacy on New Year's Eve as it is considered a good omen for the coming year. Both the normal rice grains and glutinous rice grains were ground into rice flour the night before. Then the women and the elderly needed to heat the stove and steam the flour in the pot. This process was quite time-consuming, but it did not require the young and strong men to help. Therefore, Chu Wanning woke up a little later than usual and walked slowly towards the kitchen. When he arrived, he saw a big pot on the large sunning ground. The half-a-man-tall wooden bucket was steaming hot and was constantly emitting steam. The village chief's wife was standing on a short stool, occasionally filling the pot with rice powder. A few children were running and playing around the stove. From time to time, they would take out a bunch of roasted peanuts and corn cobs from the fire pit. What surprised Chu Wanning was that Mo Ran was working very early, helping the village chief's wife to watch the fire. A child ran fast laughing. She suddenly stumbled and fell to the ground. She then sobbed a few times before crying loudly. "How did you fall?" Mo Ran helped her up, dusting off the mud on her body and asked, "Are you injured anywhere?" "My hand," the little girl wailed as she raised her dark hands for Mo Ran to see. Mo Ran carried her and brought her to the well. He fetched a bucket of water for her to wash her hands with. The distance was a little far, so Chu Wanning could not hear what he said to the little girl. But the little girl held back her tears and sobbed. After a while, she stopped crying. After some time, her tears turned into laughter. She looked at Mo Ran with a face full of snot and began to happily chat with Mo Ran. Chu Wanning quietly stood at the corner and watched him. He looked as he coaxed the child and carried her back near the fire pit. He then, Mo Ran pulled out a sweet potato from the fire, carefully peeled its skin, and handed it to the little girl. As he watched, he felt as if he had seen the past 5 years that Mo Weiyu had gone through. Ah, Shizun is here. Yes. Only after a long time did Chu Wanning walked over to Mo Ran's side and sat down. He looked at the roaring fire under the stove for a moment and asked, "What are you roasting in there?" "Peanuts, sweet potatoes, corn." Mo Ran said, "Since Shizun is here now, I'll roast a candy for you." "Candy can be roasted. Shizun shouldn't do the roasting. Candies burn immediately." Mo Ran laughed, "I think it would be better if I do it." As he spoke, he took out a piece of milk malt candy from his pocket. He removed the straw wrapper and used a pair of tongs to pick it up. He brought it to the stove and roasted it a little. Then, he immediately took it back and took the candy out. "Hiss, it's a little hot." He blew on it and then held it to Chu Wanning's lips. "Try it." Chu Wanning was not used to being fed, so he reached out and took the candy. The milky white candy was a little soft from the roasting and the milky fragrance overflowed when he chewed. Chu Wanning said, "Not bad. Roast another one." Mo Ran roasted another one. Chu Wanning took it again and ate it himself. "Give me another one." Mo Ran roasted 8 in a row. When he was about to roast the 9th, a child ran over and asked Mo Ran for a sweet potato. Mo Ran could not free his hands, so he could only let Chu Wanning get it. Chu Wanning picked up another pair of tongs and picked out the biggest one. Mo Ran glanced at it and said, "Put that back and take the smaller one next to it." The bigger one looked delicious. "The bigger one isn't cooked yet." Mo Ran smiled. Chu Wanning was a little unconvinced. "How do you know it's not cooked yet?" "Trust me. I often roast them in the wild." "Give him the smaller one." "The smaller one is sweet." Chu Wanning had no choice but to take the smaller one. The child did not know what kind of outstanding figure Chu Wanning was in the cultivation world, but seeing that he was willing to pick the sweet potato for him, he leaned over and whispered to Chu Wanning, "Gag, I want to eat the bigger one." "Go and ask the other Gag." Chu Wanning said, "He said you shouldn't get it as it is not cooked yet." The child really ran to Mo Ran and said, "Mo Ran Gag, I want to eat the bigger one." Mo Ran said, "If you want to eat the bigger one, you have to wait a little longer." "How long is a little longer?" "You have to count from 1 to 100. But I only know how to count from 1 to 10. The child felt wronged. Mo Ran laughed. "Then you can only eat the smaller one." The little child had no choice. He sighed and could only accept the unfairness of fate. With his head drooping, he said, "All right, then this little one will be fine." Chu Wanning peeled the sweet potato for him. When he was almost done, Mo Ran's candy was also roasted to its softest. If he did not eat it now, he was afraid it would completely melt. Thus, he hurriedly peeled it off and handed it to Chu Wanning. "Shizun, here, open your mouth." There were still sweet potatoes in his hand, so Chu Wanning did not think much of it and naturally opened his mouth. It was not until Mo Ran fed him the soft and warm milk candy and used his rough fingertips to gently brush the corner of his mouth that Chu Wanning suddenly realized that he had eaten the candy that his disciple had personally fed him. The tips of his ears instantly flushed red. "Do you want more?" Chu Wanning coughed lightly. Fortunately, the firelight was warm and reflected on his face, so no one could tell that his expression has changed to something a bit strange. He said, "There's more." Mo Ran laughed. "Just enough to feed you. There's only one last milk candy left. If you eat more, there won't be any left." Because he was relaxed, the word he used was sloppy and was spoken without much consideration. Thus, he casually said the word feed. However, a disciple would naturally not dare to speak to his Shizun like that. The words he uttered contained implications of pampering and forcefulness, such as when the Shizun was feeding the children or the emperor feeding the wives and concubines and even, the one taking charge in bed. The conquerors above used their scalding hot flesh to feed the woman who was groaning beneath them. Chu Wanning was reeling at the implications of those words and did not come back to his senses for a long time. After the rice was steamed, it had to be spread out. Now this part required hard physical work. The strong men in the village had to swing a wooden mallet to pound the rice dough. The village chief gave Mo Ran a wooden mallet wrapped in gauze and wanted to pass one to Chu Wanning as well, but he was stopped by Mo Ran. Mo Ran laughed. "Village chief, my Shizun has never done this before. He can't do it well." Chu Wanning was speechless at the sight. This is something he was not willing to accept, as he felt himself got a little angry. Since the moment he had left He Mountain until now, there had never been anyone who could associate him with the words "can't do it well." What he usually heard from others were something like, "Cultivation master, can you please do this, or, do that?" For the first time, someone had intervened on his behalf and said, it's not something he could do well. Chu Wanning was feeling indignant. He wanted to shake his sleeves and shout angrily, "It's you who can't do this well." But he restrained himself. Because what Mo Ran said was the truth. It was really something that he couldn't do very well. In the end, they were arranged in front of a stone mortar by the village chief. The stone mortar was already filled with steamed rice dough which was emitting scorching hot steam. Mo Ran said, "Shizun, I'll be making the rice cakes later. Remember to help me flip the rice dough after every 3 pounds. Be careful not to burn your hands and don't be in too much of a hurry. Also, don't get hit by me. If you hit me with this mallet, you can forget about cultivation, just farm instead." Mo Ran laughed. "I'm just saying. It's better to be safe than sorry." Chu Wanning couldn't be bothered with this sort of idle chatter. At the side, the other 2 men team had already started. He didn't want to be left behind, so he stood beside the stone mortar and said, "Come on." Mo Ran swung the mallet. The first strike was very heavy, hitting the soft and hot rice dough. The rice dough sank in and wrapped around the mallet. He swung the mallet 3 times, then raised his bright eyes and said to Chu Wanning, "Shizun, please flip it over." Chu Wanning flipped the rice dough over, and Mo Ran swung the mallet again. After a few rounds of working together, they had mastered the rhythm very well. Basically, when Mo Ran swung the mallet for the 3rd time, Chu Wanning would then flip the rice dough over. Just as he withdrew his hand, Mo Ran would have swung the mallet again. The procedure seemed simple, but it actually not so, as the strength used to pound the mallet had to be properly controlled. The person hitting them had to be very strong and full of energy. They flipped the rice dough over and over again countless times. When the rice dough became thoroughly soft and completely sticky, they would be considered done. Even after a long while, Mo Ran still didn't show any sign of exhaustion. However, the villager men beside him were starting to get tired. They began loudly counting in hoarse voices, 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. In time with the pounding of their mallets. Mo Ran found it interesting, so he followed their rhythm and hit the rice dough together with them. When the rice dough was half ready, the people beside him were already panting while Mo Ran still didn't feel anything. He smiled at Chu Wanning and said, "Again." Chu Wanning glanced at him. The young man's forehead was full of sweat. Under the sun, it glistened like honey. His lips were slightly open. He wasn't out of breath like the other men around, but his breathing was somewhat heavy and his chest was heaving. When he noticed that Chu Wanning was looking at him, he was startled for a while. He then raised his sleeve and wiped his face. His eyes were as bright as the stars. He smiled and asked, "What's wrong? Is there rice dough on my face?" "No." "Then." Chu Wanning was watching Mo Ran's forehead, sweating profusely from the heat, but as he had told him yesterday, he was properly wearing his robes with the lapels folded up to his throat. Suddenly Chu Wanning felt that he couldn't bear to see him like this, so he asked, "Are you feeling hot?" Yesterday, he asked Mo Ran if he was cold. Today, he asked Mo Ran if he was hot. This really made Mo Ran very confused. The temperature today and yesterday was about the same. After a short pause, he answered, "I'm fine, Shizun. If you're feeling hot, then take your upper clothing off. If Shizun doesn't like it, then I won't take it off." Chu Wanning then said, "It's even more annoying when you're all sweaty." Since he said so, Mo Ran started to feel uncomfortable. He then took off his outer robe and upper garment and threw them on the graphite rock beside him. Chu Wanning looked on coldly, but his heart gradually heated up. He looked at Mo Ran's broad shoulders and firm arms. After taking off his inner garment, he could almost feel the scalding hot air assaulting his face. As expected, Mo Ran was sweating all over. Under the sun, he shone with a glossy luster. He was like a mermaid out of the water. He turned around and smiled at Chu Wanning. He was so handsome that he dazzled all the onlookers. Would the esteemed cultivators like something to drink? The village chief's wife held a tray with cups of tea and asked the both of them. Mo Ran returned to the stone mortar and picked up the wooden hammer again. He smiled, "Thank you, but there's no need. I'm not thirsty yet." A hand reached over and took a teacup from the tray. Under the astonished gazes of the people around, Chu Wanning drank an entire cup of tea with gusto. He then passed the empty cup to the village chief's wife and asked, "Please give me another cup." "Shizun, are you that thirsty?" Unknowingly, Mo Ran stabbed Chu Wanning with these words. Chu Wanning then raised his head towards Mo Ran. With his eyes burning with vigilance, he said, "Thirsty? No, I'm not thirsty." He then proceeded to gulp down an entire cup of water again. Mo Ran looked at him and couldn't help but feel puzzled. When did Shizun's pride become so bad that he was ashamed to even admit that he was thirsty? End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 141. Shizun, don't strip. After Chu Wanning had his last drink, the two get back to work again. When Mo Ran moved to fully swing the mallet, Chu Wanning knew he was in trouble. The large movements made the lines of the young man's body look even more taut and well defined. The golden light of the sun was like a waterfall rushing over his body, flowing down sensually along his firm muscles. When he raised his arms, his shoulders stretched open to emphasize his chest, which was smooth and tight like a hot rock that had been basking under the sun, containing an amazing amount of heat and strength. The wooden hammer smashed vigorously into the stone mortar and sunk deep into the soft and moist rice dough. When it was lifted again, some of the sticky white paste got stuck to it until it was struck down again and again, making the rice dough more and more viscous. Mo Ran exerted his boundless strength again and again into the strike, so much so that Chu Wanning even felt that if he were unlucky enough to be hit by that mallet, he surely would be crushed into smithereens. Mo Ran's expression was focused as he panted slightly. His chest rose and fell in rhythm with his heartbeats. There was sweat between his dark eyebrows and the jut of his throat moved slightly from time to time. The muscles on his upper arm relaxed and contracted with the motion. Chu Wanning watched his movement, entranced as he couldn't help but recall the dream he repeatedly had. In that dream, he was on Mo Ran's bed and like the rice cake in the stone mortar, he was invaded, kneaded, humiliated, and pounded into the mud. He was so lost in thought that he probably missed more than a couple of times when Mo Ran called his attention. "Shizun, Shizun." He suddenly came back to his senses after repeatedly being called on by Mo Ran. However, his wildly beating heart was yet to calm down. There was a glimmer in his eyes and the jut of his throat rolled. His eyes were still a little out of focus as he replied, Mo Ran's clear eyes looked down at him, but because his body was hot, those eyes seemed to be blazing. He said, "Shizun, come, turn over." Chu Wanning only felt that with this gaze and those phrases, the dream and the reality intermittently overlapped each other. He suddenly felt a little dizzy as a scarlet light seemed to flash before his eyes. He saw two people rolling around on the red bed sheet embroidered with golden phoenixes and dragons. A strong muscular man was pressing down on the other as red waves of desire rolled all around them. The man below tensed as his toes curled tightly and his calf muscles spasmed. Shizun, come, turn over. He seemed to have heard the man's hot breath, as if it was just behind his ear. Let me see your face as I fuck you. Chu Wanning was shocked by the inexplicable shadow that flashed in front of him. He suddenly closed his eyes and shook his head. What was going on? Was that an illusion? Or was it a too detailed memory of that wet dream? His heart trembled and his blood surged, yet cold sweat dripped down his face. Mo Ran sensed that something was amiss. So he put down the wooden mallet and walked over to his side to ask, Shizun, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well? Nothing's wrong. His voice made Chu Wanning restless as if he was being bitten by ants. Chu Wanning fiercely pushed Mo Ran away and raised his embarrassed and indignant phoenix eyes. The corners of his eyes were slightly red. He gasped for breath, hating himself for being so edgy. It's just that the sun is too strong and making me see things. Don't stand so close to me. You're all sweaty. Mo Ran lowered his head and looked down. As expected, he felt uneasy. He knew that Chu Wanning was very particular with cleanliness, and so he immediately moved to the side, but his eyes were still following that person, unwilling to look away. After that, Chu Wanning remained silent, and by the time the rice dough was ready and everyone was sitting around, he was already gone. Oh, are you asking about Cultivator Chu? He said he had a headache, so he went back to his room to rest, the village chief said. I noticed that his cheeks were a bit red when he left, maybe he had a fever or something. When Mo Ran heard this, he got very anxious. He didn't linger to help store the rice cakes and instead hurriedly ran to the small courtyard where the two of them were staying. When he pushed open the door, there was no one on the bed. He became even more worried. Suddenly, he heard the sound of splashing water coming from the kitchen. Mo Ran hurriedly lifted the curtain and recklessly rushed in. Then he saw that Chu Wanning had already taken off his clothes and was holding a wooden bucket full of water. He was standing barefoot on the red brick floor, obviously taking a shower. However, it was the end of October and the frost had already passed. And yet Chu Wanning was fucking taking a cold shower. Mo Ran was stunned. His face turned green, then white, then red. He stared at his master, who was completely naked. Except for the rumbling sound of blood flowing in his ears, he could not hear anything else. It was like the surging tide of the Qian River. What did he just saw? Since his rebirth, this was the first time he saw Chu Wanning's body in full detail. There was no mist, no concealment, nothing but this familiar figure, the sight of this body that had shattered the defense he had built and the tight lock he had put on his memory. He felt as if the hot blood in his entire body were burning like magma gushing out, trying to break free from his flesh and skin. Everything was exactly the same as what he was familiar with. Nothing changed in the slightest. He suddenly found himself breathless. He saw Chu Wanning's shoulders with its perfect curve and strength, like a bow that was pulled to 70% full, ready to shoot. He saw Chu Wanning's shoulder blades moving under the thin, delicate skin. Then he followed the flow of the water. Yes, he followed the flow of the water with his gaze as it cascaded downwards and came to Chu Wanning's thin and slender waist and the two shallow dimples behind his back as if they were filled with wine, ready to poison those who desired him. Further down, he saw that pair of firm perky buttocks, like plump honey fruit in autumn. He knew exactly what kind of ecstasy he would be in if he'd touched them, knew how he'd trembled with pleasure when joined, as if his soul would split open. From then on, he'd be kneaded together with the person beneath him, experiencing ecstasy beyond words that it was hard to get rid of that addiction. Cultivator Mo. Suddenly someone shouted, Cultivator Mo, are you here? Mo Ran was shocked and turned around. Before he could prevent it from happening, The door curtain was pulled open. Ling Er leaned in and said as she walked, "Why did you leave in such a hurry? My mother asked me to call you to eat sweet rice cake, you." When she saw that Chu Wanning was taking a bath, she was instantly stunned into silence. "Chu Wanning. Ling Er." "Ah!" the girl screamed, and hurriedly covered her eyes. Chu Wanning's expression was also extremely bad and tried to get into his clothes in a rare flurry. However, he didn't expect that there would be two uninvited guests barging into his room when he came back to take a cold shower. What the hell? As per his usual habit, after taking his clothes off, he had just casually throw them off by the entrance. Was he supposed to walk naked through the entirety of the kitchen and fish for his clothes under the gaze of a grown girl? Just as he was at a loss at what to do, Mo Ran walked straight towards him and actually raised his hand to hold off by the wall, shielding him with his arms. Mo Ran then turned to Ling Er and said, "Get out." "Ah. Yes. Yes." The girl was also scared silly. She was stunned for a while before she turned and staggered out the door, then proceeded to run away in shock. "Chu Wanning." Mo Ran's face darkened. After confirming that she had really walked far away, he heaved a sigh of relief and turned around to the sight of Chu Wanning's calm face. Only then did he realize that his actions were very similar to a vicious dog protecting its food, baring its teeth to scare away the intruder and then whimpering as it turned around to lick the hard-earned food. His hand was still on the wall, and in order to cover Chu Wanning completely, he stuck very close to him, so close that he could easily smell Chu Wanning's scent. He couldn't help but be stunned. His head got very hot as he started to feel dizzy. Scents were the easiest to evoke memories and desires, just like how one would feel hungry at the smell of roasting meat or think of winter snow when smelling plum blossoms, and so on. It was the same for lust. Mo Ran only felt that his spirit was overly agitated as the defensive wall of willpower that he had painstakingly built was about to be overturned. Chu Wanning's scent was like a spark that fell into his dry chest, igniting his beastly nature and burning him to ashes. Standing close enough to a fully dressed Chu Wanning was normally enough temptation for him, let alone now that the person was standing in front of him completely naked. He hated how he couldn't just grab Chu Wanning's cold and wet wrist, turn him around and press him against the wall. He would then directly tear off his own clothes, fiercely stick to this person and hold him up, so that his back was pressed against his chest, and then violently enter him. Just like how in his previous life he would ruthlessly take him, life and death could be taken in the midst of sweat and panting. He wished he could do these things as before. He really couldn't take it anymore. He wanted him so bad. Mo Ran's breathing suddenly became heavy. He didn't say anything, and neither did Chu Wanning. The two of them stood together close to the wall, standing very close to each other that they are almost touching. Mo Ran's arm muscles tightened, the veins in his body were bulging out, his whole body was trembling with how much effort he was exerting to keep himself in check. He told himself, "Can't touch him, can't touch him. Respect him, cherish him. Can't commit the foolish act of desecrating and humiliating Shizun." He mechanically repeated this mantra in his heart. The weather has turned for the cold, but his forehead started to sweat. Can't. Mo Ran, you can't, don't let your imagination run wild. The jut of his throat moved. He was trembling as he closed his eyes to block his burning gaze under his very own eyelids, but his face was full of confusion. If Chu Wanning was in his normal frame of mind, he would have noticed that Mo Ran's reaction was out of ordinary. But at this moment, his situation was not much better than that of Mo Ran's. In fact, he was in an even worse condition. His expression was neutral, but heaven knew how much willpower he was exerting to maintain his disposition, to project the calm that he was far from feeling. Mo Ran's breath was so hot and heavy, full of overbearing scent unique to the male species, that almost burned him. And his arms that were propped against the wall were so firm and thick, they seemed really strong and powerful. After his revival, he had not sparred with Mo Ran. Yet, he knew that if he only fought with pure strength alone and not use any spells, then with those arms, he would sure to suffer defeat. He wanted to avoid looking into Moran's eyes, so he lowered his gaze only for it to fall on Moran's chest. Although they were not pressed against each other, Moran was so close to him that only a thin line was separating the two of them. He could clearly feel the masculine tension emanating from Moran's broad chest that was blazing with how hot it was. It was as if it could melt the coldest block of ice in the world and turn it into a springtide. Shizun. The young man suddenly called out to him. He didn't know if it was his own imagination, but he felt that the other person's voice was a bit hoarse, full of heavy desire and moist heat. Moran had called him Shizun countless times, in calm and respectful tone, sometimes angrily and even sometimes with a hint of ridicule. However, this was the first time he had heard a different form of Shizun from him. The address coming from between his lips and teeth were mixed with the thick scent of lust. It sounded so sensual and intoxicating. Chu Wanning felt as if even the joints of his bones were tingling. Impossible. Moran would not call him with such tone. He must have heard wrongly. Maybe, he had thought too much. Perhaps, his very own heart had become dirty. Without conscious thought on his part, he stepped back until his naked back bumped into the cold wall. He couldn't help but shiver as he tried to open his trembling lips. However, he didn't know what to say and therefore he could only slightly open his mouth. Moran's eyes darkened. He looked at those moist, lightly colored lips. Although he didn't move, his mind was already filled with fantasies. He imagined himself lowering his head and kissing them, prying open Chu Wanning's lips and teeth, his hot tongue coarsely invading that forbidden area that no one had ever attacked before. He imagined his hands grabbing Chu Wanning's waist, vigorously grabbing them that could leave violent red marks on his skin. No matter how much he suppressed it, the blood that was surging within Moran's body was still that of a wolf. His passion was boiling hot, bordering on violence that he even wanted to tear up the person he slept with. He wanted to eat the other person clean from the inside out, licking away every last drop of blood, every inch of flesh. He was a carnivore through and through. Closing his eyes, he suppressed the boiling lava in his chest. He knew that he was in a bad situation, he knew how similar a man's desire was to a beast. He had to suppress himself before the tide of passion became uncontrollable and chase the ignorant rabbit away for good. He withdrew his hand and spoke with an almost hoarse voice saying, "Shizun, I'll go get you, your clothes." A heavy breath brushed past Chu Wanning's eyelashes. Moran turned and strode to the door, picking up the clothes that Chu Wanning had thrown there. Chu Wanning was still leaning against the wall, but he felt like he had run 100 miles. His whole body felt exhausted and he couldn't get enough air. He slightly narrowed his phoenix eyes and saw that Moran had his back to him, flipping through the clothes that he had taken off. He suddenly remembered the state of a certain part of his body. He was stunned frozen for a few seconds, then suddenly grew alarmed with the realization. When Moran came in, he was showering with his back to him. When he turned around, Moran was close to him but didn't look down, so he didn't notice the sign of his desire. But if Moran took the clothes now and turned back again, then Elder Yu Heng's high and noble reputation as well as Chu Wanning's aloof and restrained image would crumble in an instant. Chu Wanning was instantly anxious. He saw that Moran had already separated the clothes and was holding them in his hands. He saw that he was about to turn around. Chu Wanning only had two choices left. 1. Pretend that his leg suddenly hurt and squat down. 2. Poke him blind. Before he could make a decision between these two terrible choices, Moran had already turned around and said, "Shizun, you what?" He didn't finish speaking. The moment he saw the scene in front of him, the rest of his words were abruptly cut off from his lips and sunk deep into a quagmire, unable to be pulled out. End chapter. Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 142. Shizun, this is torture. It turned out that at the critical moment when Mo Ran turned his head, a brilliant idea came to Chu Wanning's mind. Almost at the last moment, he turned his body around, crossed his arms and braced against the wall, leaving his opponent with an unhindered view of his smooth and strong back. This way, Mo Ran wouldn't be able to see his front. Chu Wanning felt that he was really smart for coming up with this in no time at all. This fool didn't know that what he was exposing to Mo Ran was his slim waist, his perky and firm buttocks and the pair of his slender and strong legs. He was like a rabbit that had been skinned and roasted over a fire until it was golden brown and crispy, leaving an unvoiced message that said, "Please help yourself." "Thank you." Mo Ran felt his throat go dry and his eyes seemed to be bloodshot. After a while, he said, "Shizun, what are you doing?" "What am I doing?" This posture really seemed a bit strange. What could he say that would get him out of this sticky situation? Chu Wanning turned half of his face, his expression calm and solemn. Trying to hide something only made it more obvious. Mo Ran had already put down the clothes in his hand and was walking towards him. Perhaps it was because the light was against him, but he felt that the expression on Mo Ran's face made him shudder. It was like a hungry wolf in the forest who saw a piece of fresh meat, but the meat was hanging on a trap. The wolf hesitated. The hunger and thirst in its stomach fought fiercely with the rationality in its brain. The flames of war spread across its body and surged through its eyes. Mo Ran's black eyes were very bright as if emitting a predatory light. Chu Wanning finally felt that something was amiss. With a simple phrase, he placed the bowstring on the bow and spoke in a sharp tone, piercing through the eerie silence. "Rub my back." Mo Ran's moist voice was stuck in his throat as he spoke with a slight nasal sound, making it seem very sexy. What? This was really the excuse that Chu Wanning thought of when he was feeling frantic. Since the words has been spoken, he couldn't take it back. He could only pretend to be calm and collected as he continued, "Since you're here, then rub my back before you leave." Mo Ran. "I've been busy these past few days. My body is covered in sweat and it's making me feel uncomfortable." Chu Wanning tried his best to appear casual and nonchalant. "It would be good if I could get my back clean with a thorough rubbing." He couldn't tell whether he was able to fool Mo Ran or not, or whether his lie sounded natural or not. But in the end, Mo Ran still listened to him and obediently took a towel. He soaked it in warm water and began to rub Chu Wanning's back. Elder Yu Heng had always been a wise man, but this got to be one of stupidest thing he had ever done. Nothing in this world could be more torturous than this. The person he's in love with was standing right behind him and with a rough towel was rubbing his body with his large hands. Every place that was touched was like a sail through spring water, leaving behind small hot marks. Although Mo Ran had already restrained his strength, it was still very strong. Moreover, his flesh had never been touched like this before. He felt every inch of his muscles were twitching. He had no choice but to tighten his body to keep still, barely preventing the person behind him to see how affected he was. He leaned his forehead against the wall, in a place where Mo Ran couldn't see. He bit his lips tightly and his phoenix eyes were red at the edges. His desire was so hot that it thickened. It was already slightly moist like the dew on a branch. He might be a person who had not engaged in any carnal acts. However, in front of the person he loved, how could he endure such stimulation and pretend to be unaffected? It was simply too unbearable. But then, if it was Mo Ran who was asked what is the most torturous thing in the world, the answer would be remarkably different. He would probably answer that it was when that person you desire the most stood completely naked in front of you with their hands against the wall, shoulders and back relaxed. How that person was completely unsuspicious of your motives and just magnanimously handed everything over to you, allowing you to use a towel to rub his entire body with your large hands while filthy and dirty thoughts ran through your mind. Of course he knew that he was just scrubbing Shizun's back, but if he used just a little bit of strength, that person's skin would turn red and have that sexy hue of being bullied and abused. He brushed the towel across his shoulder blades as he cleaned him delicately and moved down around his waist where he unconsciously lingered as the gentle ministrations turned more vigorous the further he went on. He felt the person beneath him tremble slightly, but he couldn't tell if it was his own imaginations or not. He stared at that fair and full curve, restraining himself until his eyes turned bloodshot. Only when exerting his utmost control did he manage not toss the towel away and directly grab it with his hands and leave 5 soul-stirring red finger marks. He had already tasted the ecstasy of having the person in front of him, but even so, he still has to restrain himself, endured silently and forced himself to be a gentleman. This is simply too unbearable. Thus, the two of them suffered for quite a while just like this. And if this towel scrubbing continue, something was going to explode. At last, Chu Wanning finally couldn't hold it in any longer and said with a hoarse voice, "That's enough. You can go now. I'll do the rest myself." Mo Ran let out a sigh of relief all at once. His forehead was full of sweat. He acquiesced in a low voice, "Yes. Shizun. I'll leave you to it." The door curtain was lifted once again and Mo Ran went out. Chu Wanning didn't come back to his senses until a long time had passed. He was still leaning against the wall, his forehead against it. His ears were blood red, the same as the scrub marks on his back. He didn't know if Mo Ran noticed it or not. He opened his phoenix eyes slightly and as if mortified, he bit his lower lip. After hesitating for a long time, he gingerly reached out and held his swollen and painful desire. From the beginning, he ran back to his hut to take a cold shower in the hope of suppressing these filthy feelings. Unexpectedly, man proposes but heavens disposes. By chance, Mo Ran pushed him deeper into the waves of the sea of desire. Chu Wanning, who had always relied on the clear heart mantra to resist the most base of human nature, finally couldn't help but use the most ordinary and most embarrassing form of what normal humans do to relieve himself of the overwhelming desire that was about to overflow. His lips were slightly parted, his eyes were half closed. His expression was somewhat pitiful as if aggrieved. He was leaning against the cold wall but he could feel how his forehead was burning hot. His beautiful back and shoulders were hunched as the jut of his throat rolled. His breath was coming in low gasps and gulps. So sinful, yet so beautiful. Like a white swallowtail butterfly that fell into a spider's web, in the tight tide of passion, he weakly shook his wings but did not have the strength to fly away. He ended up being dirted after all. Dirted to the bone, dirted so miserably and pitifully that tempted others to violate and drawn into the addiction. In the end, Chu Wanning got so furious that he punched the wall. He was so ruthless, so angry, so unwilling that he used so much strength that his knuckles were bruised and bleeding. Bastard! It was unknown whether he was scolding himself or Mo Ran. Chu Wanning's eyes were wet from the cacophony of different feelings inside of him, feelings of affection, of hatred, and even of confusion. In the blink of an eye, they had been in Yuliang village for more than half a month. The busy harvest season was coming to an end. Since the day he took a cold shower, Chu Wanning had been avoiding Mo Ran like how one would avoid a snake or a scorpion. He didn't notice anything strange from Mo Ran, however, he couldn't stand the changes within himself. When a person has been rigid and refined for a long time, it would be especially easy for him to be judgmental. Otherwise, why else would Chu Wanning look down on people practicing dual cultivation? It wasn't jealousy at all. Elder Yu Hang simply couldn't stand it and find the act loathing. He never looked at erotic images because he really didn't want to, and he was not just being pretentious at all. For Chu Wanning, things like liking and kissing were something he could still tolerate. However, when it came to the next step, such as masturbation and other similar deeds, then his expression would darken as he found them unacceptable. This is similar to putting some lard in the bowl of a vegetarian. If push came to shove, he would probably still find it delicious. However, if you gave him a piece of roasted meat that was brown on the outside but still had the smell of blood on the inside, he would probably be disgusted to death. That day, After getting himself off, Chu Wanning sobered up as he gasped for breath and looked at the stickiness on his hand. He felt as if a handful of cold water had been poured over his head. His face turned gloomy. What was he doing? He couldn't control himself from being teased by a little brat in his early 20s. He had to rely on self-gratification to calm the surging tide in his heart. Chu Wanning had goosebumps rising all over his body. Afterwards, whenever he had an encounter with Mo Ran, he had to step back. He was afraid that he would carelessly release the scourge in his heart and do something that he would regret. Whenever he retreated, so would Mo Ran as well. Mo Ran was also really scared. He realized that his desire for Chu Wanning was much stronger than he expected. The dam he built before couldn't hold back the turbulent waves. The passion in his bones was about to overflow at any time. He knew that there was only a slight difference between human nature and bestial nature. He didn't want to hurt Chu Wanning again should this slight difference overcome him in a moment of weakness. Therefore, he also subconsciously avoided Chu Wanning. The distance between the two of them gradually increased. But instead of a fallout, it gave the illusion that the disciple was being respectful while the master was being kind. Thus like this, the days passed peacefully. One day, the hunters in the village came up to the mountain and slaughtered a fat and beautiful deer. The villagers suggested that they hold a bonfire gathering at the small sunning ground at the entrance of the village that night. Therefore, every family brought out some food, be it pastries or dried meat. The village chief even opened 2 jugs of sorghum wine. Everyone sat around the bonfire and smelled the fragrance of the roasted deer. They ate and drank noisily in a content manner. Chu Wanning and Mo Ran didn't sit together. The two of them were quite a distance apart from each other with the bonfire between them. Both of them tried to steal a glance at the other across the bonfire, both trying not to be caught by the other while doing so. They glanced at each other thinking that the other wouldn't notice. However, their gazes always met halfway. Therefore, they pretended that it was just a casual glance and lightly lowered their eyes. After a while, they would sneakily climb their gaze up to each other's cheeks when the other weren't paying attention. The orange flames were surging and the firewood was crackling. The surroundings were filled with laughter and toastings, but they couldn't hear or see anything that's happening. They only have eyes for the moon in the sky illuminated their hearts. The wine that the village chief put out was quickly finished, but everyone felt that it wasn't enough to satisfy them. Mo Ran remembered that he still had a jug of good quality pear blossom white wine in his house. He greeted them and got up to go get it. He was halfway there when he heard movement behind him. He turned around and asked out, "Who's there?" The sound of footsteps immediately paused. Then, a pair of green shoes embroidered with yellow flowers slowly came out from the corner. Mo Ran was stunned. "Miss Ling Er? It's you." Ling Er seemed to have drank a little too much wine. Her snow-white cheeks were flushed red and her lips were plump and bright. She stood under the moonlight, gazing at him with eyes full of emotions. Her full chest rose and fell with her rapid breathing. She said, "Cultivator Mo, wait a moment. I have something to tell you." End chapter.